Hi guys and welcome back. So let's get straight on with it. The first thing I want to do here is set the tempo. I'm going to set this to 138. I have made this track before, just for those of you who are new to Born to Produce. This is how we do it. We make the track before we actually make the tutorial, and then we remake the track explaining what we're doing on every single step as we go along. That way we're not sort of changing our mind every 5 minutes and auditioning millions of samples and then only choosing one of them, and then we sort of keep undoing things on the screen, and that just gets really tedious for you, the audience. So that's why we make it completely beforehand. And so now the tempo is set, the first thing I want to do is bring in the kick. I would normally start with the kick and some drums, because that is like the foundation of the track, if you like. If you're building a house, you will start with the foundation. But there's no right or wrong answer. You can start with the melody if you wish. It is quite possible to do that. No problem at all. So let's go to, just going to go to the internal Cubase samples. You can go to anywhere on your computer, or you can go to Loop Masters or various sample websites like that. And these days you can actually just buy the single sample rather than having to buy a pack. So that's really useful. I'm just going to go to the Tech House sample pack in Cubase, which is new in Cubase 11. But really it doesn't matter what kick you use here, as long as you're happy with it. That's the main thing. So just going to scroll to Tech House kicks. Now there's loads in here. I ended up using Tech House Kick 1, but there's a few in there that you could easily use. Totally up to you how you do it, but in your DAW. But I always create a sampler track just in case I want to change my mind on the kick later on. I find it's easier if you're triggering the kick via MIDI to just quickly drop in another sample if you've changed your mind about using a different kick. I just find that easier. So let's just program in something sort of future bass style. We're set to 16ths here, so that's absolutely fine. Need to go down to C3. So we're not just going to have a 4 to the floor, 1, 2, 3, 4 type thing. It's going to be a bit different than that. So I'm thinking, maybe space them out a little bit, sort of do. Something like that maybe. Let's just turn this down. Very important is to turn down the first element in your track, which in my case is nearly always the kick drum. Turn this right down, because if you've got it right up at 0 and then you start adding all your other elements, then the whole project is going to start clipping and distorting, and that's the last thing you want. So always turn down the first element, maybe something like -8. Let's just bring up the mix console here and have a look. Yeah, it's hitting about -12 dBs, which is absolutely fine. And another thing I did on this track actually, which I've just remembered, and I don't normally do this, I just sort of gave it a whirl, gave it a try, and it worked pretty well. And that is to put a maximizer on the stereo out. Now normally I wouldn't do this until the very end of the track when you're doing the mastering, but it worked pretty well, so I might as well do it again. It's not a limiter, although it's similar to a limiter. In Cubase you have a maximizer, which just gives you more gain basically without clipping. So let's just put this up. I would normally have this around the 40% mark. So that's fine. That's absolutely fine for now. This is very important though, to turn down the first element, as I've already said. So I quite like this kick. It's got quite a nice click to it. The click is the top end of the kick, which is surprisingly very important. It's not just all about the low end here. That's why I chose it. And I don't feel any need at this stage to process this kick. It's sounding pretty fat already, and it's got a nice click top end to it. So there's no point me EQing this just for the sake of it, just because I've seen someone on YouTube do it. We might EQ this later on. We might add a bit of saturation or distortion or something to beef it up a bit. But at the moment, it doesn't need anything. So let's move on to the trap snare, which is used a lot in future bass. Now, and don't worry, this kick drum is going to get a lot more interesting than that, but we're just purely building the skeleton here at the moment. So I know what I'm going to use. Trap snare 09. I think this was in one of these new ones again. Might have been Hard Knocks or Lo-Fi Dreams, probably Hard Knocks. But this is the one I chose. Again, just use your own samples or choose whichever sample you want. Doesn't matter too much as long as it sounds fairly similar to that. In fact, that one's even better. Snare 09 BB. I like that. It's got lots of attack. Also got a bit of reverb on it as well. But again, we're going to do a sample track in case we change our minds later on. And we're going to need to turn this down, of course. Absolutely fine. Let's just turn this down. We'll add some more reverb probably in a sec. So with the snare, we probably do want to EQ this because we want to keep all of our low end, i.e. sub 150, or sorry, 100 hertz rather. We want to keep that all free for the bass line, the sub bass line, and the kick drum. We want to keep that completely free. The key to a really good mix in EDM is managing that low end. And you'll see in a minute that in most samples, even hi-hat samples, you do have some low end in there, which is, it might be quite low. You can see it in there. It's only coming up to about -8, but it's enough to start clogging up your low end, which you don't want. So we're just going to low cut that bottom end in the snare, of course. Just do Alt-P in Cubase to loop and start straight away. So that's fine. We've cleared up that space for the kick and the bass line. And if we do that with all of the elements that are not kick or bass, then you will have a tremendously clearer low end, and it will make a hell of a difference to your mixes. Some of you, of course, know this stuff already, but for those that didn't, I hope that was useful for you, or will be useful for you. And we're going to make this all sound better later on, don't worry. This is all just the bare bones, as I said. Right, I was going to add hats, but I think we'll do them in the next lesson. I want to try and keep these lessons fairly short. Let's have another listen. It just needs a bit of a brighten up. It's just a little bit sort of not bright enough. Bit too harsh there. I find, 5 dBs or 4 dBs, about 2.5K there is working quite nicely to just bring out the brightness of that snare a little bit. That's just coming from experience. I know that when we add in tons more stuff into this track, it's going to need to kind of have its own space and cut through. Otherwise, it's just going to sound dull. So I just know that's coming later on. That's why I'm doing that now. Okay, just quickly add some effects tracks here. Move a couple of reverbs. And I'm going to use my favorite Cubase reverb plugin, which is Revelation. And we'll have a long reverb, and we'll have a medium or short one. So for the long one, I always like to choose Cathedral or Bright. Mix is 100%, as you probably know, on FX channels. We'll leave that as it is for now. Quickly do another one. And we're just going to send reverb to it, channels to it, like the hats, the snare, the pluck lead, and whatever else. We can just quickly send it to the reverb channel rather than having to add a reverb insert for every single channel that we want reverb on, which is crazy because it screws up your CPU and it also takes longer as well. So this one, we're going to have a shorter one. Call it short, but it could be medium. So let's choose something like maybe a medium room. So maybe like plates. Let's see if there's... The plates are quite nice. Let's have a look at plates. emulated from an old plate reverb, an old mechanical plate reverb. That's where the emulation comes from. Mix 100%, and we can turn down the main time a little bit maybe. You can see the live update on the screen. So we can always adjust this later on. Let's just send something to it very quickly. Now the snare has already got reverb on it, so we need to be careful. Although it could definitely have a bit more there. So let's just go into it, go into sends. So we'll probably go for, well, short or medium, switch it on. Going to be too much probably to start with. And we adjust the send level here. Okay, that could be still too much. So let's just turn down the room size and the main time and the tail a little bit. That's probably about right. Just quickly put a low pass on these reverbs as well, just to be absolutely sure. Don't really want low end reverb too much. Another thing that messes up your mix. So we'll go on to hats and other things in the next lesson. Quickly do some housekeeping. I like to have things all named lovely. So kick, shift and enter to name the part in the project window as well as the track here. Call this snare, shift and enter. Have my drums yellow, just alt click yellow, alt click yellow. And effects channels I normally have, I think, orange. Okay, that's fine for the initial lesson. We'll start adding more drums and make them sound a bit better as well in the next few lessons. So see you then, guys. Bye bye.